On this episode of Pitchdeck, I would like to welcome the co-founder and CEO of Calculi, Mr. Eric Billingsley. Eric, welcome.
Thank you so much.
No problem. So why don't we start off in a minute or less? Why don't you share with me your pitch, your elevator pitch?
Sure. So if you've got more than 20 engineers in your company, your engineers are probably spending at least a third of their time, in many cases, more than half their time, just dealing with the process of getting their code into the hands of the customer.
Right.
What we do is automate the entire process from end to end, from code commit out through deployment, and give you a full audit trail of all the activities in between, which allows you in like the medical and financial industries to have all the information you need for all the audits that you may go through.
That's awesome.
And on top of that, your engineers basically spend 2 to 3 times more of their time writing code instead of managing the process.
Right. The thing, I remember when I first met you and you were telling me about your company, the immediate fear I had is I remember from decades ago, when people come up with these big out-of-the-box solutions, they're not out of the box at all. They're highly customizable. They take months and months and months to implement. Like if you do a GL implementation at a large company, it'd be crazy to do it without a system integrator, some kind of VAR. But what really caught my attention about your company, you can literally take it out of the box and with a small team of engineers have it up and running the very first week.
Yeah, absolutely.
That blew me away, because if you look at some of the competitors you guys deal with, the GitLabs and people like that, they're only doing a couple verticals. You guys are doing end to end.
That's right.
Which is almost unheard of. And the strange thing was, and I remember telling Ron this at one of the Alliance meetings, it's like, God damn it, if I was doing what Eric's doing, I would be bragging about that stuff. And Ron and I were laughing because it's just not your nature to brag about what you're doing. But what I'd love to do is talk to you a little bit about the company's purpose and really talk about the core problem you're trying to solve. And if you can quantify it in terms of engineering man hours, I think that would be super salient.
Sure. So what we're really trying to do is allow companies to get their products to their customers very quickly. And what that allows you to do is actually save in a number of ways. So first, if you can do rapid turns on your product, you can test, you can experiment. It's not a super expensive process to make a change.
Yeah, the idea that you're going to do code release every 6 months, those days are just gone.
They're gone, but the process for a lot of companies is still there.
Yeah, the mindset is still there, I've noticed.
Absolutely.
There's
just a concept that everything takes time. And as a result, software software development is kind of like air. It expands to fill its container.
Yep.
And so if you expect things to take a quarter, it will take a quarter. If you expect things to take a year, it will take 2.
Totally.
So what we do is really automate that entire process so that it can take less than an hour to get a code change into the hands of your customer.
That's a super critical advantage that you have, because I work with a bunch of companies at StartX. I work with some of the companies at the Alliance. And when I go through their annual operating plans, I see it in their plans. And I start asking them questions about their products, because it's like, you're going to launch 2 versions of this in 1 year. Why does it take so long to crank this thing out? And then you start digging and you parsing out. You start to see it in the headcount allocation as well.
Yep.
And that's when you start pulling it apart and you realize there's a big pain point here that they haven't solved. So they're literally throwing resources at the problem.
That's right. Yeah. So it manifests itself in terms of the project management overhead, the QA department, the operations teams. And, in the last few years, people are really trying to build these DevOps teams to pull all this together. And it's gotten to the point where the people they would hire for that role, they can't find anymore.
Yeah.
And so as a result, what almost every company has done is really cobbled together this Rube Goldberg machine, for getting code out through the process. The problem with it is it almost always comes with these interruptions as it moves from one team to the next and then back again.
Yes.
And so by giving one process that everyone has an input to and can see and get the outputs from in real time, that goes away. And
Yeah.
so what we find is that it streamlines the entire process. There's a lot of companies that have come out in the last few years around CD, or continuous delivery,
Yes.
or continuous deployment.
That's a huge buzzword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I like to say is, if you haven't changed your fundamental development process,
Right.
you're talking about the last 30 minutes of a 6-month process.
Right.
And so who cares?
Exactly.
Right? So if you think about everything from that first commit all the way through,
Yeah.
that's the 3 to 6 months for a lot of companies that we can shrink down.
Yeah. When I think about your company in a nutshell, to me, when I finally got the end-to-end solution, I was like, oh, you guys are accelerating code delivery. Obviously, cycle times is super important. You're delivering frequently, like you can deliver with a frequency that other people just could never hope to because their processes aren't as smooth. But also, I can't help but think this has to improve the quality of what you're delivering.
Yeah.
Because this process is so streamlined.
Exactly. And it does that in a number of ways. So one is you are consistently deploying your software. You can use the same deployment model in your testing environments as you do in your production environments.
Right.
We've also automated the creation of ephemeral test environments. So they come up, you do run your tests, and they go away.
Yeah.
Which allows engineers to actually run full QA suites in isolation.
Yes.
Without having to have these super expensive development, test, and integration environments sitting around all the time being unused.
I've lived this problem at a couple different companies where we thought the A/B testing platform we were using was working. Mm-hmm. And when I went and did the math, we actually had a situation where we made a pretty significant code change, and it was in the comparison shopping space. And I know that business intimately, having worked at a unicorn and kind of gone through all the sheer guts of building one. I knew the code change was going to have a massive impact on the conversion. I just did. I intuitively knew. And when they did the code rollout, nothing happened. Uh-huh. And that's when I pointed my gun at the A/B testing platform and I said, all right, you guys, from a statistically relevant standpoint, I want you to prove to me this platform's working because I don't think it is. Yeah. And sure enough, after about a month of back and forth and engineers telling me I'm crazy and I'm stupid, I got a very humble meeting invite at 8:00 in the morning. It was attended by about 20 different people, including the CEO and myself. And the engineers came forward and said, we think we need to switch our platform. So the lesson I learned, not only was it an expensive solution because we were using a third party that's pretty expensive, it was generating terrible decisions for the company. It was costing us time and money in a huge way. So when you started talking about this, it hit a massive pain point for me.
Yeah.
And I assume you guys probably see this with your existing customer base.
We see that in a few different ways. So one is just the ability to run A/B tests is all about being able to get something out there cheaply and quickly.
Yeah,
so
totally.
You can measure it.
Yeah.
Right. And so by simplifying that process, we help a lot in that space.
Right.
The second is by just having data about what is actually out and live is actually difficult for a lot of companies as well. So by keeping track of the versions and the packages and maintaining that entire flow for them,
yep,
we give them full visibility. In fact, we generate release notes on every single release automatically from all the data we have in Jira and all the commits.
Yeah, this builds a level of discipline into your release process.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it just, sometimes systems, I've noticed sometimes systems, like if you put in a CRM system or a GL or some other type of enterprise solution, some people like being measured and some people don't. Mm-hmm. But it's been my observation, I've always liked those kinds of systems. They're a little bit of a pain in the neck to maintain. They're extra work. But it's an opportunity to brag about your achievements.
That's right. And in our system, it's not a lot of extra work. So we actually go out of our way to make sure that we are taking on the responsibility of coordinating the data between various systems. So we work with all of the Git, source control repositories. We work with Jira. We work with ServiceNow. We've done Salesforce deployments, MuleSoft deployments. We do the heavy integrations, that heavy lift.
Yeah.
So that our developers don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like you're solving a problem, and this is how I think about it at a 50,000 foot level. You're solving a problem that almost everybody in Silicon Valley has and beyond.
That's right.
And this extends, and I mean, if you're talking about 20 engineering, 20 people on an engineering team on up
Yeah.
to the Fortune 500, you're talking about a massive swath of business, and you're agnostic as to business vertical.
That's right.
You could do automotive, pharmaceutical, banking, everything.
We've had some really good success in the financial industry, and also, recently in aerospace as well. There's been some news about software quality issues causing problems.
I'm glad I wasn't on that flight.
And as a result, the whole industry is actually really focused on how to enforce software quality. They actually have a set of requirements that they have to go through that are some of the most stringent I've ever seen.
Right.
And out of the box, we actually satisfy almost all of it.
That's super nice. I imagine this helps with ISO compliance. I imagine this helps with audit work that auditors do to make sure you're operationally tight and clean. It auto-generates the audit reports that any auditor would want to see.
That's exactly right.
So this cuts cost across the entire enterprise of activity. And the accountability I love, because people management, as you know, is one of the hardest things you do every day.
Yeah.
And when you have a system like this that makes you super accountable, you can really stack rank your people very quickly.
That's true.
You find your rock stars fast.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
I just love that.
What's even more important is a lot of times they're not your rock stars.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have 60+% of their engineering is actually done by consultants or offshore teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Huge,
that don't work
huge
for
business.
them directly.
Yep.
And so imagine having visibility into how many people are actually working on your projects.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I work with a company that does outsourced engineering work for Google. They do it for Facebook. They do it for Disney in the entertainment. Like, people don't know, they go to the Academy Awards website and they think ABC and these other, part of Disney, they're generating all this. They're not. My buddy's doing it through his third-party company. It's a global company with, hundreds and hundreds of employees. But Disney's just giving them the logos and the skins. They're doing the rest.
Yeah, and we're starting to actually work with a few companies that do that.
Yeah.
And they see value in it because they're able to highlight the quality difference between what they're doing relative to other teams.
Yeah.
They're able to show the productivity improvements by using our tools. And they're also able to actually bring it in and be our sales channel.
Yeah.
And so it's turning into something really interesting. What I'd love to share though is, how we got here.
Yeah.
How we decided to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And it goes back to our experience. So, I used to run search engine development for eBay. I ran eBay research labs. I went on to Google, worked in the Maps organization, saw the tools. They spend over $100 million every year on developer tools.
That's one of the few luxuries and nice things about working at a large company is you have ungodly amounts of resources.
And I also worked at Apple. And from all that experience managing engineers at huge scale, I developed a sense of what works, what doesn't,
right?
What are the metrics that matter?
Yeah.
All of that has gone in.
Right.
On top of that, my CTO, he comes from Gap.
Yeah.
And he was there back in 2009 when Jez Humble was there writing the continuous delivery book.
Right. And if you could talk a little bit, people think about the Gap as an apparel company.
Yeah.
But when you look at their supply chain and you look at their end-to-end platform for delivering stuff in a timely fashion to each store, maybe you could talk a little bit about the underpinnings of that company.
Yeah. So there's a few really interesting points. So one is every store is a tiny data center.
Yes.
Right. So they have full inventory management built into the system.
Yeah.
All of that is changing constantly and being maintained. It used to take them 6 months to update that fleet.
Yeah.
Robert, my CTO, one of the big contributions he did early on was actually getting that down to every 2 weeks.
What's so interesting about this is, if you think about it, this is just like a Kanban system in Japan for cars.
Oh yeah,
like Toyota, and it's somebody just automated the whole damn thing, and so you're not producing a bunch of clothes that are the wrong size, or you don't have shelf space for. And it just, when I heard it, I was like, I never thought of the Gap as a tech company, but when I talked to you, it's like, Oh my God, are they?
And then the online business is even more important, especially now.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so they have very early on invested heavily in having an amazing online experience. When I was at eBay, it was one of the systems we looked at,
Of course.
as that's how you do online retail.
Right.
And the reason they were able to achieve that is because he invested heavily in CI/CD very early on.
Right.
And really made that work at a scale that a lot of people hadn't even considered.
Yeah.
And so, his experience, my experience, our founder's experience, Bashir, working with the CTO forum, we've talked to CIOs and CTOs from probably half of the Fortune 500.
Yeah.
Everyone has this problem.
Yes. This is not new.
Right?
It's been there for a while.
And we have a unique capability to solve it.
Yeah.
Right.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask, because this has been a problem going back to when I worked at Fortune 500 companies. I mean, I've been in Silicon Valley almost 30 years. This is not a new problem.
No.
But what you're doing is new. And from a timing standpoint, maybe you can talk a little bit about why now is a perfect time to solve this. I would love to hear that.
Sure. So a few things. One, it's an extremely busy market.
Yeah.
There are so many tools on the market. Almost every company has at least 50 of them. There's over 200 major products on the market in the DevOps space. But it all requires someone to cobble it all together.
Yes.
And the ability of a company to actually get their hands on someone that is intimate with those tools and smart enough to pull it all together,
yeah.
They're paying basically for 3 engineers to get that one.
Right.
And they can't find that one.
Right.
And so we're at a moment where you just can't get the skills you need to do this well.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity for automation is there. On top of that, the cloud is really taking off with COVID as impacting everything. The ability to collaborate has become much more difficult. The need to have your resources outside of your data center behind 5 layers of firewalls has become real. And so we're seeing kind of everything aligning towards digital transformation.
Right.
Well, GuideRails, our product, is a digital transformation engine.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is just a super excited group of engineering leadership that really wants to drive that transformation. They see us as a path to get there.
Yeah, the funny part for me is when I saw what you guys were building, it immediately clicked in my head. I had flashbacks to other companies that were throwing engineers at this problem, trying to make systems talk to each other, trying to get code out the door. And frequently compromising. The product marketing guys, this is like their best friend.
Yeah.
Because now they don't have to compromise on customer journey, product service design. They can go nuts and not have the concern that half their stuff isn't going to get implemented.
That's true. And what we find is if you're in a Fortune 500 company, you usually have more than 300 engineers or so.
Yeah.
Those engineers are only spending about 20% of their time writing code.
Yeah.
Almost all their time is going to dealing with all these different tools, conversations about the next set of releases.
Right.
It's all of the minutia and the planning as opposed to the working.
Yeah.
And I always joke, if you've got more people talking about work than doing work, you've got a problem.
Yeah, I would say that reminds me, that's very reminiscent of a Fortune 500. You spend an ungodly amount. I always tell people, they say, well, why do you like startups so much? And I said, because at a Fortune 500, you have 10 meetings to do one thing.
That's right.
At a startup, you can have one meeting and accomplish 10 things.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what we do is actually bring kind of that creative capability back into a larger development organization.
Yeah.
Because the need for constant communication to do your daily tasks is minimized.
Yeah. This is almost like a recruitment tool as well for engineers.
Oh, absolutely.
Because not only if you're a rock star, you're going to get found quickly, but secondly, there's nothing worse than spending a bunch of time on bureaucratic stuff that you don't want to spend time on.
Yeah.
You would much rather be doing what you got into the business to do, which is write meaningful code. And I mean, your productivity level alone has got to be a huge job retention plus.
Well, so a lot of engineers, this is the dirty secret of the tech industry. A lot of engineers wait until nighttime to do their coding.
They're nocturnal.
Well, do you know why though?
I don't.
Because they're spending all day in meetings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
We pay them to write code and then we force them to sit in meetings.
My life is meetings, so I'm probably one of the guilty ones here.
And what's even worse is a lot of times your most expensive engineers are not working on your product for your customer.
Yeah.
They're working on all of this stuff.
Yeah, and frequently what I see at companies is they take their very best engineers, they turn them into engineering managers, and then they're not pounding code anymore. They're spending all their time managing the stuff that your platform manages.
That's right.
So you can run a much flatter, leaner organization with a platform like this.
And your engineer and that manager will probably be more happy.
Yeah, because you used to have the rule of 15. If you have 15 people, you probably need a director of engineering. If you have 45 or more, you probably need like a VP of engineering. But this platform changes those dynamics quite a bit.
Drastically.
Yeah. And I've always liked these kinds of solutions because it shines a very bright light on the performance of the employees. And again, you can identify your rock stars super fast, and you can just see in the data when you do have a review with an employee, if somebody's, not getting stuff done in that environment, it makes it much easier to transition them because the proof's there.
Yeah. The comparison I like is really with Salesforce.
Yeah.
So we are taking a repeatable, tested process. We've automated that process for you. We've got the full data collection built in. You can actually see the productivity of teams. You can see the quality of the products.
Yeah.
Right? It gives you predictability.
That's why crappy salespeople hate Salesforce. I ran Microsoft. I've dealt with Salesforce a bunch of times, but I ran Microsoft Dynamics at a previous company as well. And I used to love to run the weekly reports because it's like, doesn't look like Frank had a very productive week. Yeah. It was kind of a joke, but it kind of wasn't because it held us all very accountable.
That's right.
And if there was a roadblock, any kind of blocker to getting a sales deal done, we all attacked it violently.
And that's what is actually really important about the metrics. It's not so much, this person's good, that person's bad. It's we're having an issue here.
Yeah, totally.
How do we solve it?
Totally. I mean, you just, as soon as you find blockers, you just attack them violently.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your job title is. Like I've done so much product design. It's like, Ed, what are you doing in product? It's like, my boss told me to fix this now.
Yeah. Well, a lot of engineers are introverts. And, an introverted tendency is to try to solve things in isolation.
Yes.
And so as a result, you'll find that projects will just start to take a little longer and take a little longer. And if you ask for an update, they'll say it'll be ready tomorrow. And, this helps bring those up early.
Yeah.
And catch those sorts of issues so that you can actually address them quickly.
Yeah, it's almost like a learning platform. It teaches the engineer, even if you're introverted, someone's going to see this problem. They're going to come visit you.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to fix something that's really blocking the product or service from getting out the door.
And the engineer can see those metrics themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
I think you're going to find, half the people who are really good are going to totally embrace this, and then some percentage will just not enjoy it.
Well, so I actually think we're going to see the opposite. What I think we're going to see is the bottom half of engineers are actually going to become much more productive.
Yeah, I think it's a productivity platform for sure, but your rock stars are going to stick out on this thing.
They'll stick out like a sore thumb. They always do. This will just allow them to stick out creating software for your customers.
Yeah.
Instead of doing a bunch of infrastructure work.
And it's going to just validate the feeling you have in your stomach when you're stack ranking your team.
That's right.
This will kind of validate that. So the market for this is obviously huge. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the market size and some of the GitLabs and others, some of the competitors. I would love to hear just how big an opportunity this is.
Sure. So right now, the DevOps market space, which is probably the closest to where we compete. We also compete with kind of a value stream management market space as well. But the DevOps market space is a little over $8 billion a year right now.
Yeah.
It's growing at about 19%.
That's the served market.
That's right.
What's the TAM?
The total addressable market is looking to be about $25 million by 2025.
25 billion, you mean?
Billion, sorry.
Billion.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So we're still,
It's early days.
I'm wearing my investor hat right now. It is early days, and it's going to have accelerated growth, and that TAM is going to get addressed at some point because it's such a painful problem. And if you don't address this problem, your competitors will, and you're screwed.
That's right.
So you guys can sell fear to large organizations. They don't adopt things aspirationally.
Yeah.
They adopt things out of fear. They're going to lose their job, or their company's going to lose its number one position in the marketplace.
Well, I mean, the average tenure for a CTO in a large American company today is about 3.5 years.
That's like dog years, right? So that's like...
So, you know, we always kind of make a joke, if, you know, for the CTOs that don't buy our products right now,
Yeah.
their replacement will.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I always tell people, when you see technology waves coming, even if they're a little big and intimidating, grab your surfboard, because they're not going away.
That's right.
And if you stand there and try and push against it, like I've watched industries do before who've tried to fight technology. In particular, I can think of the music industry tried to do this back in 2000. No better example of an industry that just literally for a decade got crushed by technology.
Yeah.
And it's because they tried to pick a fight with a giant tsunami, and they just got, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a huge separation occurring right now. So, you know, almost all of the kind of old generation of products. So the DevOps space is not new. It's been around for over 10 years. And it started out with data center tools.
Yeah.
We think of that as like DevOps 1.0.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, you started seeing a lot more products that were really geared towards the cloud.
Yeah.
And we consider that kind of DevOps 2.0. And that's where I would stick GitLab and Harness and companies like that.
Those are your current competitors.
Yeah. And they compete on, you know, fractions of what we do.
Right.
Right. But if you don't pull it all together,
Yeah.
those friction points, those handoffs are actually where everything falls apart.
Yeah. It's a nightmare. I've lived this, and it's the generator of more meetings than anything else.
That's right.
You're constantly having to have meetings with other groups to get synced up, because you don't have a platform that's using a common language.
Well, and then when things break, it turns into finger pointing.
Yeah, that it's where you see those email threads that are like 35. It's like you're playing table tennis with email, and you're going to tons of these meetings. And if you step back and look at it and squint your eyes a little bit, you realize we don't have a common language. We don't have a platform that allows us to work, you know, collaboratively on this stuff. And then you get into people who have opinions about how you should be doing your job.
Yeah.
On a platform they don't understand, and then it just creates all this friction, and it's such a time suck. So that was the other thing that got me super excited about this platform, because if you can walk into the biggest Fortune 500 and solve their problem, it's obviously worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if you can go down to a team of 20 people and add value, now you've got an interesting company to me.
Yeah. I mean, so, you know, one of our CEOs in our group that we're on together, he actually is one of our customers now. And he's
cool.
only got 35 engineers.
Yeah, but
Right.
that's enough.
But he was at a point where he's going to have to start building a DevOps team.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we started talking about why we need to do this. He's also transitioning from a shrink wrap software product to a SaaS product. And so deployments are going to be a big part of his business moving forward.
Yeah.
And so we're accelerating that whole process for him.
Right.
You know, he was on a path where it was going to take him probably 18 to 24 months to get his first version out the door. And now we're talking about doing it this year.
Yeah, the difference between shrink wrap and the continuous release, you have to have a communication strategy so that your customers understand what's being released, because they're getting inundated with new technology they might not understand the benefit of. And so having a really credible communication plan along with the platform to deliver it, super important.
Yeah.
Especially to hold your price points and have your customers really value what you're doing. I think that's awesome about your product. So I kind of get who your competitors are, and they're very incomplete. If you look at your slide deck, you guys really check all the boxes. None of your competitors do.
No, not even close.
They do not have the next wave of solutions the way you guys do.
The place where they really break down is actually in testing.
Yeah.
So there's a huge gap between software developers running unit tests and the production deployment.
Yeah, totally.
And that is where 3 to 6 months sits.
Yeah.
And so we are the only product on the market that really addresses that space.
Yeah. When I think about the internal champions, you can think about a CIO, you can think about a CTO, you could think about a CFO because clearly you're saving a lot of money. But also,
And a CISO.
yeah, and that salespeople like it because it accelerates, time to market. The marketing teams like it because they get a more inclusive, feature complete product product or service they can sell. I can't think of anybody inside the company who isn't going to love this and champion it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once they've experienced it. So the number one problem we run into is people can't believe it.
Yeah, well, I had that experience. The first time I heard it, I was like, oh, this is going to be the biggest pile of crap that's going to take 6 months to put in place. It's going to cost me $250,000. I had all those preconceived notions.
Yeah.
I came at your slide deck with such a scrutinizing eye. I was just like, oh, I'm going to burn holes in this.
Yeah. We've really worked hard to eliminate as many objections as possible. We've set it up so that, the metrics aren't about punishment. It's all about a leaderboard.
Right.
It's all about exposing success and finding areas where you might want to improve.
Right.
On top of that, it's become, we've really spent a lot of time making sure that data is clean. And so when we pull data from other systems and pull it into us, we're getting it ready for us to build an AI model on top of as well. So there's a whole nother generation of our product that's just waiting to be built that is going to be able to give basically a co-pilot to the engineer.
Right.
And so that engineer who's normally working in isolation and perfectly happy to just, be in a dark corner, suddenly is going to have something there that they can use to help them improve.
Right.
At the same time, we're going to have an AI co-pilot for the managers.
Awesome.
So they'll be able to see where they may need to spend a little more time this week. Right?
That's what's super cool about your platform is you guys haven't done a lot on it today, but in the future, it's clearly on the roadmap. You're going to have a fully enabled cloud-based AI experience for people, and you'll have predictive analytics and all the wonderful things that you need to further increase productivity.
Yep.
So that over time, your product becomes so much more feature rich. It enables you to hold your price points or even increase pricing over time. The way the great SaaS companies like a Salesforce do.
Yep.
They just create all these a la carte services and people are only too happy to pay for them because they know what it does for their bottom line.
Well, another place that we're seeing a big opportunity is with the security market. So there's lots of static security scanners and container security scanners, and there's just all sorts of products in the space right now, and they're all really hard to integrate into your process.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And so we're starting to work with a few of them to actually make it super simple for them to integrate into our system. And what they're finding is that if they're integrated with us, the use of their platform expands drastically inside of a customer.
Yeah, what's nice about that too, if that can be a tightly coupled service, that should actually reduce the risk of having security issues because you've gone end to end and figured out all the potential vulnerabilities ahead of time. That makes that easier for me to write a check, frankly.
Absolutely. And so what we see is most companies usually have a security scan on their code once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And then the security team ends up opening a whole slew of bugs against the organization
Right.
that then get prioritized along with all the features.
Yeah.
Well, usually it comes after the planning cycle too.
Right.
And so it may be another year or two before those actually get addressed.
Yeah.
In our system, the engineer actually gets immediate feedback. And so right after they've made the commit that caused the problem,
Right.
they have something that tells them, hey, you just created an issue. Here's how to go fix it.
That's awesome. That just makes the whole integration, because security is always a big deal. There's sort of a chicken and an egg thing that you always have when you put a security system in place, like at a bank. You always have to have very heavy duty security. The problem is it doesn't talk well because banks have archaic old systems, deliberately so, because they're harder to hack. And they're so low tech that you just can't really get at them with modern tools and attack them through the internet the way you can a lot of modern platforms. Having said that, the integration of security tools in the banking industry is extraordinarily painful. And I would imagine you're going to be a godsend to anybody in the banking vertical.
So far, so good. It's one of the big selling points actually for our platform.
Yeah, I had no idea how bad this was until I did some work with a banking client. I was stunned. I had to be polite about how I was just, you use what? Like Fortran and stuff. I just was like, you guys, this platform's from like 1975. What are you doing? And then they kind of walked me through why they keep everything manual and they don't do email and all the other things. So it's just kind of, it's kind of scary.
It depends. You've got some banks that are really looking to replace those types of systems. But the big thing that they're worried about is new entrants to the market.
Of course.
Don't come with that baggage.
Yeah. I mean, it's like organizational transformation, which I've done a lot of, is painful at big companies because people don't like to change. They're very comfortable. And so it's painful. It's super expensive. And it's just way easier. When people ask me, they're like, oh, we're trying to solve this problem. I'm like, why don't you just start a new company and just go solve it?
Yeah.
Because you have nothing but a white sheet of paper in front of you. You can go as fast as you want. And odds are, if you're solving that problem for one company, you're probably solving it for a whole bunch of companies.
Yeah. I mean, in a large company, everybody knows this. If you're in a large company, you can't go to the bathroom without 20 people agreeing to it in a meeting.
Yes.
Right? That's why startups are so successful. But if you can make, every bite at the apple super cheap.
Yes.
You can actually keep up. And you can actually get into a point where that scale, that size, isn't a hindrance to innovation.
Right.
It's a plus.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like you're turning big companies that are very bureaucratic and have lots of friction points into a frictionless platform where people can go fast and they could actually maybe hope to start, because big companies are terrible at innovation.
Yeah.
They always buy innovation because they can't do it internally. They just don't have the horsepower and it's too bureaucratic. It's so hard to invent inside a big company. But it seems like your platform gives them a fair shot at doing some pretty innovative things, and that should make the marketing teams ecstatic.
Oh yeah, totally. It's the key. So faster time to market allows so many good things to happen inside of a company.
Yeah, totally.
Right? You have happier customers. You're able to experiment. You're able to innovate. You're able to come out with new products. It just changes the game.
Yeah, and in this day and age, when you see shocks to industries like the oil industry right now, half the companies in the oil industry are lining up to file for bankruptcy protection because the price of oil is so low. And then we have this big demand shock where demand just dropped exponentially because everybody's at home with COVID, worried about COVID. Those kinds of shocks to your industry are a very hard thing to navigate when you're a big company.
Yep.
But if you have a platform like yours, it gives you a much better, it gives you better tools to deal with those kinds of shocks, whether it's a supply shock or demand shock. You should be able to react much faster and be more nimble.
That's right. And
hopefully survive, to fight another day. Because this isn't the last time we're going to see weird things happening to different industries. It happens.
Yeah, I mean, some of our customers actually are, experiencing a downsize.
Yeah.
Right now. So, they've been told 15%.
Yeah.
Knowing where to chop is really helpful.
Yeah, like I said, your rock stars are going to stand out.
That's right.
Really fast. You're going to be able to see what's going on. But I know several viable companies that I work with who have terrific business models, are very profitable. I talk to the CEOs, they're scared to death right now.
Yep.
Many of them have gone through RIFs, reductions in force. They've laid off people that they valued, that they wanted to keep. But they're just scared to death of their runway right now.
That's right.
And they're freezing all their hiring. So even if they find a rock star who can come in and help them and make the company stronger, they're not doing it. And so to me, a platform like yours in an environment like that is going to give them the maximum flexibility.
That's right. So, the way it works out, when we were pricing the product, we actually did this in our heads. So, we're looking at a minimum, a 20% improvement in productivity.
Yeah,
and
easily.
We're charging 2% of the engineer.
Easily. Yeah, that's
right.
Cheap. That's a great value proposition. I always ask people, when you think about your business, if you spend $1 on your business today, when do you get that dollar back and how much extra money do you make? And so I always talk about the round trip on cash. What's so cool about this, you guys are coming into the marketplace at a price point, I think it's like $1,000 or something per seat.
At the higher end, yeah.
But it's so, you have such a scalable model and it's so inexpensive. Nobody's going after this product with pricing in mind. People are going after this product. They're desperately trying to solve a problem.
That's right.
And I love that about what you guys are doing.
And we've come up with a sales model where it's really land and expand.
Yeah, totally.
So what we try to do is find the teams inside the company that are under the most pressure to move quickly.
Yep.
Those are the guys we partner with first, and then everyone else starts to come.
Yeah, because people start looking good.
That's right.
And the other thing too is over time, as this platform grows, and I've seen this with really good platforms like Salesforce before, they become much more feature rich over time. The margins expand over time, and they just become an indispensable backbone for an organization. And I see all the hallmarks with your business. It has that exact same look to me.
Yeah, I think so too. When we first started looking at this problem, the ubiquity of it was the first big aha moment.
Yeah.
The other is that lack of being able to attract the talent to do it yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So many people are doing this, and as a result, they're actually passing it off to, not engineers, but IT guys.
Yeah.
And so the engineers aren't getting products they're happy with. If you actually do surveys inside these companies, you'll find that one of the number one complaints of engineers in these larger organizations is the tools.
Yeah, it's retention gold.
That's right.
I mean, your platform is just perfect for that. So I want to talk to you about your team, because I love your team. I think it's awesome. And then also I want to talk to you about the financials without naming customers specifically, but I would love to know who you guys are, because you have some really impressive clients right now. I mean, I was kind of stunned and like, holy crap, how did you guys land those guys? So maybe a little about the team.
Sure. So myself, I spoke briefly about it before, but I go back to Alta Vista.
Yeah.
I was the guy who was sleeping on the carpet in his office when we launched Babelfish.
Cool.
If you guys are old enough to remember that. And then I went on to eBay with Louis Monnier, one of the founders of Alta Vista, and he and I wrote the search engine for eBay.
Cool.
Created eBay Research Labs, went to Google, worked in operations for a couple of years, and then worked in Maps for a couple of years.
Very cool.
Got pulled out, went to Apple, ran internet services operations for 4 years.
Nice.
Spent my last 18 months actually flying to China every 3 weeks, negotiating iCloud's entry into China.
Yeah.
So it's been a fun career. A lot of scale. I don't do small things.
Yeah.
And I think Calculi and guide rails is really the largest thing that I've ever worked on.
Yeah. And tell me about your co-founder as well.
Yeah, Bashir Janjwa. So he's a fantastic person. So he ran a boutique software development company working with HP and Verizon and all these amazing companies.
Right.
Walmart. And more importantly, about 15 years ago, he founded the CTO Forum.
Oh, wow.
And so we've been getting together. He invited me in when I was still back at eBay. And we have about 4 times a year, we pull together over 100 of the CIOs and CTOs from the Fortune 500. Mm-hmm. And we talk about all sorts of things. It's a very intimate environment. Everyone really shares what's going on, what their pain points are, how they're addressing them.
Right.
And so it's just been an amazing network. And that's where a lot of our early customers have come from.
Right.
Right. And then my CTO, Robert Boyd, I told you about him. He comes from Gap. He was also at Technicolor and Sephora. He's an amazing individual. He and I see eye to eye on this problem set, which makes solving it very easy.
What I like about the whole group, and it's really true across the board, there are a lot of people who work at companies like Google and Apple.
Yeah.
And then you deep dive with them and you start asking them probing questions. Well, what did you do? Well, I was the release engineer and I was just kind of this guy who pushed a couple buttons. What's nice about your team, when you do the deep dive, you guys actually had very consequential impact on very big products, very big teams, really cool things that monetized really well. So you didn't launch crap that didn't sell.
Well, and all of us have built,
Yeah.
right? So we know the pain of doing something new and complicated and big
Yeah.
inside a large organization.
Yeah.
And so when we talk to the CIOs or the VPs or the directors of engineering, we can talk to them in a way that they understand.
Well, it's nice to engage, and this happens in a lot of different types of business gatherings. When you come across rock star founders and you look at their background and their resume, it's like, I could build a company with these guys. Yeah. And that clicks in my head when I look at successful startups. Like Startups has a ridiculous success rate. Like since 2010, they have a 93% success rate. Anybody who's gotten to Series A. Mm-hmm. And that is so profoundly better than most of Silicon Valley, which is like a third totally wash out, another third have kind of a slow death, and then a third do okay. And then there's this tiny little pinpoint fraction at the top that really kill. Over time, having worked with hundreds of these companies, when I see an orbit of founders and advisors who have really done consequential things elsewhere, and then I look at their pitch deck, it's really easy to see who's going to succeed and who isn't. And I hate to say that because sometimes I run across companies and they're like, what do you think? And it's like, yeah, you guys have work to do. Yeah. And so I try to be polite. But what's exciting about your company, from top to bottom, it's great people, it's great technology. You're solving a huge known problem that every department in every company has had to deal with at some level. Yep. That's, to me, that's exactly why you do a startup. You go solve a really big problem.
We left really good jobs to go do this.
Voluntarily.
Right? Because this is a problem that has to be solved, and no one else is solving it.
That's a big problem. It's intimidating. When you told me about it, I was like, oh, geez. I had just, like I said, flashbacks to all the horrible platforms that have tried to do a fraction of what you guys are doing. Yeah. And then on top of that, when you told me you could take this out of a box and install it with a couple of engineers in less than a week, I was like, there's no SI or VAR involved. Yeah. Oh my God, you could sell this at Best Buy on the shelf. Here it is.
So it's a little more complicated than that, but yeah.
Yeah, but for me, the distribution of it is so much easier. The barrier, the installation costs, cycle time, quality.
But the reason why is really fun. We build guide rails on guide rails, we deploy guide rails with guide rails, and we manage guide rails in customer environments with guide rails.
So you guys ate your own dog food, and it turned out to be really good dog food. Right. So obviously, financially, I've looked at your financials. I know you can't talk about by name, but you've got some incredible tier 1 Fortune 500 partnerships. Tell me about what this year and next year, and also, how you're thinking about fundraising right now.
Sure. So last year we were able to land a large European bank as one of our customers. At this point, we're about 10% penetrated into the account. Yeah. And that's $1 million in ARR.
Wow.
On top of that, we've been working with some Silicon Valley companies, in retail, in financial services. We have a company that's actually in the energy sector, out on the East Coast as well. All of those, the penetration is between 20 and 50%. Yeah. So there's still room to grow in those accounts. And then this year, we've really focused on a few amazing companies. So one of them's in the aerospace industry. We're looking at signing a deal with them that'll be a penetration of 2%.
Yeah, they're a Fortune 500 big time.
Yeah, very with a goal of penetrating to about 25 to 30% by the end of the year.
That's amazing. In going in and selling, one of the things they always look at in VCs investing in SaaS companies, they always look at the lifetime value of a customer divided by the customer acquisition cost. And they always beat it into my head. If you've got an LTV to CAC of 3 or better. Yep. But what I really like about you guys, your lifetime value is long.
Yes.
It's a very long period of time, much more so than almost any other platform I've seen. And your customer acquisition cost, there's some pain in the selling process, but because the lifetime value is so long in duration, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, we anticipate that, we're only 2 years old at this point, but we anticipate with our customers that we're going to have probably a lifetime with each of them of somewhere between 5 to 10 years, at least. Our acquisition periods for an enterprise customer, it's somewhere between 6 and 12 months. For a startup, it's usually less than a month.
Yeah, and I would imagine at larger companies, the time consumption is around finding internal champions who can.
It's actually moving through the internal process. I mean, for a lot of these companies, the aerospace company we're working with, you can't buy a paperclip in less than 6 months, right?
Yeah, the approval process for POs in big companies is just agonizing.
But we're at the point where we already have the PO.
Yeah.
So right now we're just negotiating a few bits of the final, paperwork. So, but these opportunities are huge. So last year we did $1.5 million in ARR. This year we're looking at about 4.7.
Wow. Nice step up.
And a lot of that is, a handful of these major companies that, once we landed that first big deal, we became a real option for them.
Yeah, and it's funny, once you do establish a beachhead in a particular industry vertical, you can then go cookie cutter your sales approach. You learn the pain points, and it helps you accelerate. So I would imagine your cycle time on selling is going to improve.
Well, it's already improving. So we've really changed the way we do proof of concepts. Almost all these companies require that we at least show them with their code,
of course,
how things are working. And so we've started using our SaaS product for that.
Oh, nice.
So we haven't launched our SaaS product publicly yet.
Yeah.
We still have some things to do around billing and metering and that sort of stuff to make sure that we don't have people Bitcoin mining in our infrastructure.
Right.
But so we're over 90% code complete with the SaaS product. It was always built multi-tenant.
Right.
Because even in a large company, it's not one customer. They all acquire other companies. And so we actually built it to be multi-tenant from day one.
See, this is just another, probably one of the most violent forms of friction inside a large company is when you buy something else.
Yeah.
And upwards of 60% of acquisitions are deemed a failure. So if you look at an acquisition, it should really pay for itself in the first 3 years of operation. Yep. Many of them don't. Why? Because it was so friction filled and agonizing, and you had so many people disillusioned with how alienating a large company environment can be. You lose some of those really valuable people very early.
Yep.
They just realize it's like, oh my God, I'm at this big behemoth. So that's another massive pain point you guys are solving for. Fortune 500s don't grow very well internally, but with your platform, if they do go the acquisition route, I would dare say their success rate with acquisitions is going to go up pretty dramatically.
I would expect so.
Yeah,
absolutely. We've made it super easy for them to onboard. It's essentially, it's the exact same product in the SaaS environment as it is in the customer environment.
Nice.
And so it's just the same as them signing up for our SaaS service.
That is awesome. And I would imagine in the coming years, you're expecting, you're going to be hiring salespeople, but your revenue trajectory looks really good.
Yeah.
And the margins are going to expand over time. At full scale with proper branding, I think it's going to bring a real premium in the marketplace. I just do.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't.
Well, I look forward to a couple of years when I drive into San Francisco. It's like, hey, what's that? Is that another Salesforce tower? Oh, that's Eric's company.
And you asked about the funding round. So now we're actually raising a $4 million Series A.
Okay.
We have 2.75 already committed.
Nice.
So we have the lead investor. We're looking to raise another 1.25 to 2 million. We're out actively looking for VCs to fill that gap right now.
And you're looking for classic SaaS investors, which there are tons of VCs who play in this space. Yeah. In fact, I'd be hard pressed to find some that don't, unless they're medical related or something like that. So for those who watch the podcast and are interested in reaching out to you, how can they contact you, Eric?
I'm Eric at calculi.com. That's CALCULI.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Eric, it has been a total pleasure. I love getting updates on your company, and I look forward to in the future. That concludes this episode of Pitchdeck.